You're texting someone you care about. The conversation is going well, but suddenly, they pull away. They stop responding. They vanish, emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically. You wonder, what did I do wrong? Why did they shut down when things were finally getting real? You didn't push them. You didn't hurt them. You just got close. And that was enough for them to disappear. This isn't just a modern relationship issue. This is the psychological signature of an avoidant. But why do they run? What are they trying to escape? And more importantly, what exactly is the mind hack they use to protect themselves? To understand that, we must first enter the battlefield they live in. A war not between people, but between intimacy and fear. What is an avoidant? Avoidants are not cold. They're not emotionless. They feel, often more than they can process. But instead of expressing that emotion, they withdraw, they repress, they detach. This isn't accidental. It's strategic. It's a subconscious survival mechanism built deep into their emotional blueprint. From the outside, they may appear independent, distant, chill, or hard to read, emotionally unavailable. But inside, they're carrying a heavy truth. They fear being needed, and they fear needing someone even more. Where does this begin? The origin of avoidant behavior starts early, often in childhood. A child who grew up with emotionally inconsistent or neglectful caregivers learns a dangerous lesson. Emotional expression is unsafe. Vulnerability equals weakness. So what does the child do? They build walls, quietly, piece by piece. They stop crying when hurt. They stop asking when they need. They stop trusting love will stay. Over time, these walls become their default mode. And by adulthood, they've mastered the art of detachment. But here's the twist. They don't stop feeling. They just stop showing it. The mind hack, preemptive emotional shutdown. Avoidants rely on a specific internal technique to escape vulnerability. We call it preemptive emotional shutdown, the core mind hack they've refined unconsciously. Here's how it works in their mind. 1. Detect emotional closeness. This person is getting too close. I'm starting to rely on them. 2. Perceive it as danger. If I need them, I can be hurt. If they leave, I'll lose control. 3. Trigger the shutdown. Emotional distancing begins, communication stops, rational excuses activate. I'm just busy. I need space. In extreme cases, they ghost entirely. This response happens fast, sometimes in seconds, not because they don't like you, but because their nervous system screams, danger, intimacy ahead. But why is vulnerability so scary? Let's pause for a moment. Why would being open, something we all crave, be a threat? Because vulnerability requires trust, and trust is something avoidants have learned not to give freely. In their world, being open, risk of abandonment. Being seen, risk of rejection. Being close, loss of control. So they flip the script. Instead of connecting, they intellectualize. Instead of feeling, they rationalize. Instead of leaning in, they pull away. It's not indifference, it's emotional armor. Avoidance versus connection, the internal battle. Imagine this. An avoidant is falling for someone. Things are warm, intimate, genuine. But the moment they sense real connection, their inner alarm goes off. If I let this continue, I might lose myself. I might depend on this person. And if they leave, I'll shatter. So what do? They sabotage the very thing they want most. They might criticize their partner for small things, create drama out of nowhere, disappear without explanation, say they're not ready after weeks of connection. This isn't cruelty. It's fear in disguise. They're not running from you. They're running from what you represent, emotional exposure. Real example. Sarah was in a 3-month relationship with Adam. He was attentive, present, and emotionally warm. She, on the other hand, described herself as independent and guarded. Things were going beautifully, until he opened up about how much she meant to him. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She felt tight in her chest, irritated, overstimulated. By morning, she had convinced herself Adam was too needy. She texted him less, delayed responses, canceled plans, and a week later, she ended it. Not because Adam did something wrong, but because emotional closeness felt like drowning. That is the avoidant reflex. That is the mind hack in action. What this hack achieves and destroys. On the surface, the mind hack works. The avoidant feels less exposed. They regain emotional control. They avoid potential heartbreak. But underneath, they reinforce emotional isolation. They miss out on healing through connection. They repeat the same cycle. Alone, misunderstood, disconnected, and worst of all, they don't even realize they're the ones pulling the plug. Avoidants are not the enemy. They're not villains. They are survivors of emotional unpredictability. But the very mind hack they use to stay safe is the same hack that keeps them stuck, cut off, number alone. And unless they learn to recognize it and rewire it, they'll never feel the very thing they crave most: real, stable love. Long before therapists, before Freud and attachment theory, before the word avoidant even existed, this mind hack had a name, not a diagnosis, but a discipline. The Stoics called it apatheia. The Buddhists called it non-attachment. And even ancient warriors knew the power of suppressing feeling before battle. So here's the uncomfortable question. Was emotional detachment once considered wisdom? And if so, what separates an avoidance emotional shutdown from ancient mastery of the mind? Let's go back thousands of years to where it all began. The Stoics, the original avoidants? In ancient Rome, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca taught that emotions could cloud judgment. They believed pain was inevitable. But suffering? That was optional, to be free. You must master your reaction. This became known as Stoicism, a school of thought focused on reason, self-control, and detachment from overwhelming emotion. Stoics trained themselves to never depend on others for inner peace, avoid emotional overinvestment, remain calm in chaos. Sound familiar? It should, because avoidants are modern Stoics. But with a twist. The difference: practice versus trauma. Here's where it gets crucial. The Stoic avoided overattachment by conscious practice. The avoidant avoids vulnerability by unconscious trauma response. One is trained, the other is triggered. Stoicism says, I choose not to let this emotion control me. Avoidance says, if I feel this, I'll lose everything. Where the Stoic maintains openness but calm, the avoidant disconnects completely. Where the Stoic can still love, the avoidant fears love will consume them. The Buddhist view: non-attachment. Disconnection. In Buddhist psychology, there's a deep concept called non-attachment, often misunderstood. People think it means not caring, but that's wrong. True non-attachment means caring deeply, while letting go of the need to control the outcome. Loving without ownership, feeling without drowning. An avoidant, however, equates closeness with dependency. So they cut the wire before the light even turns on. They don't just avoid attachment, they avoid connection. Where a monk embraces silence to find inner stillness, the avoidant hides in silence to avoid emotional risk. Samurai and emotional restraint. Even the Japanese samurai followed codes of honor that required emotional restraint. Before going into battle, they were taught, do not fear death, do not weep over loss, do not show weakness. This discipline built warriors, focused, lethal, clear-minded. But again, there's a difference. The samurai were trained to channel emotion through clarity, Avoidants? They suppress emotion through fear. What's the difference? Discipline says, I feel, but I choose how to respond. Avoidance says, I feel, so I must disappear. What ancient practices got right? Despite the contrast, the ancients weren't wrong. There is power in emotional control. Emotional regulation is essential to maturity. Detaching from outcome reduces suffering. Knowing your boundaries protects your peace. But here's the dangerous part. When these principles fall into the hands of unhealed minds, they become defense mechanisms, not disciplines. Avoidants didn't read Stoic philosophy. They became Stoic by accident, through pain, through emotional scarcity, through a childhood where feeling got punished. How psychology misunderstood it. Fast forward to modern psychology. When researchers began exploring attachment styles, avoidant attachment was seen as disconnected cold, avoiding intimacy. But many clinicians failed to ask, what if that disconnection is actually a learned form of control? What if these avoidants are not numb, but overwhelmed? And what if the mind hack they use, emotional shutdown, is their only known path to safety? This changes everything. Avoidants aren't missing emotions. They're trapped behind them. Avoidance is not mastery. Let's simplify the difference in one line. Emotional mastery is grounded in awareness. Emotional avoidance is driven by fear. Avoidants believe their mind hack gives them control, but what it actually gives them is distance. Yes, they avoid pain, but they also avoid joy. They avoid chaos, but also love. They avoid vulnerability, but also growth. In the end, they're not emotionally free.